Hey there folks, Paul is here once again. In this video we're going to talk about creating melodies and then creating songs from really basic things called words. Let's dive right into it. So what am I talking about when I'm talking about this kind of thing? For example, right now I have like a really heavy tone with my Ouzounov 010. It's like a distorted tone, sounds really good, sounds like this. You see that there's a little bit of a reverb trail going on. That's not without cause. So reverb and delay, what do they do? What do they do for us when we want to create something out of nothing in this way? It allows us to kind of be married to our last note. This is a really big deal for a lot of creative conceptualization. Here's what I mean by that. If you play an E note, the next note being an F and then a G is going to sound really particularly Phrygian, for example, for those of you who know your music theory. For those of you who don't, it sounds like this. Sounds kind of Eastern, kind of dark and metal as hell. And it's really good to also know all of our modes and whatnot because that will help speed things along a lot. But basically, what we're going to be doing is marrying our scalar knowledge and our internal intuitive musical knowledge. And what I mean by that is, what is the next best note that we're about to play? And playing it. And being married to our last next best note and next best note. Do you understand where I'm going with this? It's kind of like a chain of notes that sound really good together. So that's why scales sound so satisfying and dull, or whatever you want to use in terms of an adjective. They're really important to have so that you have a baseline grid or matrix or understanding of the fretboard so that you can create new things using that as a guideline, not as a rule. That's a completely different thing. A rule is like, I really reject rules when it comes to music and music theory. It's not really that fun of a thing for me to always abide by the rules, especially like the circle of fifths and things like that. But anyway, to continue, we're going to use an arbitrary sentence and or word and create a melody out of it. And here's what I mean by that. I thought of the word philosopher. Philosopher. How many different ways can you start to rearrange those syllables in a way that's musical? Philosopher. That sounds pretty good. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? If you want to pick the most boring intervals ever, sounds kind of regal and majestic, but a philosopher is like a really like clever intellectual. So what would be something intellectual sounding? Well, let's start with a note. Let's just start with a note. All right, I really like E today. I don't know why. So that's E and then to the fifth, the power chord note. Oh, and with all that reverb and goo on top of that. So let's add some more complication. So it looks like I'm playing an E minor because, I don't know, E minor. So what's that last little bit? Well, it just feels like the next thing that I want to hear personally in the room. But let's forget it. Let's just stick to the script here, all right, folks? Philosopher. What is a philosopher? Philosopher the Great. Let's just throw in an incorrect sounding sentence. So philosopher. The great mind. It starts to turn itself into something. Because of my chordal knowledge and my scalar knowledge, it immediately begins to sound like, oh my goodness, a melody. So if we use that last idea as the main melody, it's good to practice it a few times, make sure you've got it down so that you don't have that, whole thing where you forget the thing. So that's our melody. And it loops pretty nicely, even though it ends on that power chord interval there. So what else can we start to do from this? Bum 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 bum. We can start to sing out what the melody is and feel it, create that metronome within our own body. That's kind of what I'm coming at. So so that's our tempo right there. And it looks ridiculous and it sounds ridiculous doing it, but this is really effective. So that's what our rhythm of the melody is. Let's simplify it. There we go. That sounds pretty good. That already works really, really well. So we've got that riff. So that all came from the word philosopher, because it sounds really like moody and melancholic, because I imagine a philosopher is someone in an ivory tower or in like a cave where they're trying to create something and discover things in themselves, and they're thinking about life and they're alone. So I imagine a melancholic tonality. That's why I went to a minor scale in the first place. I know this is maybe a little bit obnoxious to follow along with, but isn't it really interesting how one word can start to spawn an entire visual and creative idea? And then from there, bringing it to the next level, right? You can start to increase the BPM and add some intensity. So that's another thing that you can do with this idea, is you don't have to be married to the same BPM. You can start to increase the intensity of the speed and increase the intensity in which you're playing your things. One other thing that I haven't touched upon is actually playing everything with double picking on the guitar. So it starts to sound really intense this way. Maybe we'll start to lose the plot if we continue down that road. Because for me, a philosopher isn't really going through something intense unless it's that dark night of the soul where they're like, oh my God, I've realized time! You know, that's the moments in which it's like, oh my God, holy shit, relax. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. All we did was philosopher the great mind. Whoops. So the other thing that I've kind of decided to show you guys, which I only really talk about with my mentorship program students, is that next best feeling note. I touched on it a little bit earlier in the video, but the next best feeling note is a really, really wonderful thing to conceptualize for yourself. What's the next best feeling note? Let's just step away from the philosopher riff that I've started to write here and go into, I don't know, what's the next best feeling note? Let's arbitrarily pick it on the fretboard, 13D. Now, in reference to the previous melodies that I've been playing, that's quite a dissonant note. So let's try to forget that. Let's just play. All those E flats. All right, we've cleansed the palette. We've got that E flat going. What's the next best feeling note? Right now? There's already a melody beginning to form because I'm searching, I'm hunting, I'm making mistakes. It's cringy to make mistakes, right? We always go, that's not the right note. But really, we're looking for the right one. You see what I mean? By reaching for the next best feeling note, we start to create motion. Because if we do it arbitrarily like this, we're not tying ourselves down to rules of fifths and of thirds and fourths and whatnot. We're just going by feel, man, and that's so important. It's so important to develop an inner melody, an inner ear for melody rather, so that you can start to create things off the cuff. Improvisation seems to be a marriage of this kind of quality, as well as understanding what modes and scales to play in what positions and whatnot, and then having the freedom, the technical freedom, of being able to play it without having to doubt yourself. That's what it really comes back to. So I hope that this video was informative and interesting, and hopefully, I challenge you, watcher, I challenge you to try this out for yourselves and to see what melodies come out for you. You know, I picked a note that's really disharmonic to the rest of the fretboard. 13 on D is... Without context, that sounds dissonant as hell. If I add a minor third, for example. Super heavy, man, even with a cleaner tone. I'm already starting to riff because the tone is really important. The tone ultimately dictates the attitude that we're going to go for. I like those scratchy. I'm already beginning to write complicated and more complicated things. Really, tone is important because it will dictate the attitude and kind of the overall feeling of the thing. Having reverb and delay is super important so that you're married to your last note, and having something like a prompt, like a word, something as simple as the word philosopher worked so well. And now I'm gonna look back at this video and go through the editing hell of editing this video and be like, oh damn, that's a good idea, I should tab that. Because that's just the way that it goes sometimes. Recording yourself playing is also probably the last little tidbit for you. For those of you who have stuck around this long, thank you for sticking around this long. Don't forget, you should probably subscribe if you like this kind of stuff. I try to release interesting content like this on a weekly basis. But yeah, to get back to it, record yourself so that you can see what sounded the best and so that you can tab it out for yourselves. Record it somehow so that you'll never forget how to play it, and you will always be on the up and up when it comes to your songwriting, when it comes to your melody writing. All right, folks, that's all for now. I've been Paul Oz. Thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you next time, folks. Cheers.